Do you like the beetroot, the parsnip, or the sweet potato?
Welcome to the PriceWriters Podcast with Catherine Townsend and me, Jeremy Keating. Join us as we explore and discuss the world of insurance-related books, offering our insights, recommendations, and crucially, how to apply them to an insurance pricing role. Today, we're talking about Holacracy by Brian Robertson, and I think this is the most radical business book we've read, as it's all about leaderless organizations creating flat structures rather than vertical org charts. Catherine, this is not your usual kind of book, so what made you pick it up?
I mean, the concept is so radical, isn't it? Not having any leaders in your organizations at all. And so that just really made me feel just a bit curious about how that would work. I know from being a manager myself that managers are so busy, and it seems to get worse the more senior you are. So I was kind of curious on, where does that work go? Does it just evaporate? Like, do we push it on someone else? Like, how, if we get rid of all the management structure, then who is doing that work? Yeah, I picked it up from my local library and has quite a striking cover.
It's quite a striking cover, actually. So we've crossed out hierarchy. So we're abolishing hierarchy.
Yeah. And the foreword is by David Allen, who wrote Getting Things Done, which is obviously a best-selling book. So I kind of thought, well, might be able to get stuff done without managers. That sounds certainly interesting.
Yeah.
Because I got it from the local library, I sneakily read the first 25 pages while I was there.
So you're one of these people that just sort of stands around in the library reading the books.
Yeah, I know, that's me. I'm the person who can literally spend 3 hours in the library. Sorry, not that sorry. Yeah, I'm actually on first name terms with my local librarian, which is awesome. Hello, David, if you're listening. Yeah, so firstly, love my local library. And I literally just saw this one and I thought it sounded interesting. I read the first 20 pages and it just really hooked me, because in the first 20 pages, he says that he had this near-death experience.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I know. So he was flying a plane and with all these dashboard warning lights. And there was one that was flashing, but everything else looked fine. And so he was like, oh, I don't know what that does. I'm just going to ignore it. So he basically crashed the plane because he didn't listen to this warning light, which apparently was telling him that there was no electricity in the.
Wow.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. You have a near-death experience. What do? You write a business book.
I hope he also learned how the plane works.
I don't.
Just
he never says. He never says, but I don't think he flew again. I hope he doesn't. I didn't.
Fair enough.
So I thought it sounded really interesting, and the kind of thing that if you've ever felt frustrated by levels of management or difficult vertical bureaucracy.
Yeah, lots of hierarchy. Yeah, I can understand that.
I just thought that this was a book that maybe is too radical, but I kind of wanted to hear it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both work for multinational insurers, so I know what it's like to have several layers of management up to directorship, and then you've got your country level, and then you've got your international and global and group level above that. So it can be a bit like, wow, there are a lot of layers between me and sort of the genuine leader of this organization. And even then, within international insurance, even though there is a global CEO, a person who's right at the center of things, they answer to a board and shareholders anyway. So actually, it's quite a long way up to work out where the power resides. Okay, so you've already said the concept is a leaderless organization. I'm going to have to ask, how does that work?
So the idea behind the book and the idea behind the name of the book is all about holons, which basically mean whole in Greek. He doesn't really refer to this concept much. But the idea is instead of having a vertical pyramid, you have little circles. And so a circle would be a little team of people, and everyone's like a point in this circle. And for each of those points and each of those circles, there is defined authority. So you're not going up the chain. You're not going to your manager or your manager's manager to say, hey, is this okay? your authority is defined. So as long as it sits within that thing, you can do what you like, as long as it's not harmful to the business. Is the only rule. And so then what happens is that any issues or tensions that you have, any like, this person didn't deliver this thing to me, or we're getting blocked because of this deployment issue, or, whatever it is, all of those
Mhm.
things are just a case of explicitly defining authorities and responsibilities. And he says that they're like the two flip
Okay.
side of the same coin.
It's making me
So
feel like I need to ask who it is that's defining these things.
there's a governance committee that meets every 2 weeks. He says that the whole thing is like learning a new game, and he uses a sports example. But I feel like it's more like learning a new board game. And at first you're like, wait, what are the rules? The first couple of turns, you keep
Okay.
referring to the rule book and you go, hang on, do I use my whatever vortex here?
Yeah, I
And
get it.
after
Okay.
a few
But
times
this
you've
one, I
played,
roll the yellow dice or the blue dice, or yeah, I get
yeah,
it. All right.
yeah. And then after you've done it a few times, you're suddenly not thinking about it, and then you are actually being able to crack on. So he very much makes the point that this is a go slow to go fast later.
Okay.
Right. So I'll give you an example of how this works. All right.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's an example in, say, a pricing team? What does that look like?
Okay. So maybe the head of pricing says we need a quick win to improve our profitability. So the head of pricing tells the manager, we need this quick win.
Yeah.
And so the manager has to think and tells their analyst, go look at this type of vehicle or whatever it is. Go look at these things. An analyst does that and then passes it back to the manager, who checks and reviews the work, says, yeah, this is an okay proposal, but I got to pass it back up to the head of
Mm,
to get this proposal approved.
okay.
Under Holocracy, the authority of the head of is to set the best practice and say proposals must adhere to consumer duty. They must be profitable. They, X, Y, and Z, whatever it is, right? Statistically sound.
Yeah, so they set some criteria to
Mhm.
follow.
And that's
Okay.
their authority.
Yeah.
Then the manager's authority would be to check and approve the proposal that they're given. So they then have complete authority on whether that proposal goes live or not. But then the analyst has complete authority to decide what they investigate and how they do the analysis. So it might be for them, you have complete freedom to do analysis and make a proposal as long as it fits into the best practice guidelines set by the head of, right? So the idea here is that analysts have an authority to make any proposal they want. The
Mhm.
manager has the authority to accept or reject that. And the head of has the authority for the best practice.
Okay.
And the benefit of this would really be that you're not asking for consensus all the time. And you're also not, I'm going to be careful how I say this, but subject to the whims of one person.
Yeah, I understand.
So you could do some really excellent statistical analysis, but if the person who wants the proposal really wanted the number to come out as 20%, not your 15, then you might end
I
up
think,
changing it to 20, right? And so
yeah, I understand. So we tend to say that perhaps there's a bit of initial bias going on, or perhaps an a priori in someone's mind that they're expecting to see in the results. Yeah, okay.
yeah, that's a very, very nice way of putting it. But also, you're not taking this number to a committee where everyone's looking at going, oh, I know you've submitted 15, but I really think it should be higher. I think this bit of the curve should be a bit more steep. And, as long as the analysis
Mm,
is statistically sound and not harmful to the business, then this proposal will be accepted. So the idea is that you're not waiting on those consensus points all the time. And sometimes those committees can take a lot of time, but also slow up proposals as well, particularly if there are a lot of changes that come through in the committee. So people have the authority to get stuff done. The only rule being that it has to be their authority and it can't cause any harm to the business. So if someone can show or someone can object and say that's going to cause harm because this group of customers or whatever, then it won't go through. But they're the two rules,
mm,
I guess.
okay. Seems really hypothetical to me, if I'm brutal. It sounds like it might be something quite difficult to actually make work on the ground. As someone who's managed people, it's quite hard to actually even communicate stuff that's going on to a fairly sizable group of people without then expecting them to have sort of consensus on these things as such a large group.
Well, I think the benefit with this, or what he's trying to say, is that you don't need consensus. The idea is that
Okay.
it's whoever has the authority to approve it, they are the only person, kind of really matters. And the only way that other people can stop it going ahead is if they can show there is harm to the business. So
Okay.
as long as it's, I'm going to say, neutral or better, then it goes
Yeah.
through.
It's quite hard for anyone to know all that's going on, though. It feels like a recipe for a bit of a chaotic system to me. And I do agree with you. Sometimes committees and things do slow things down. But then on the flip side, we're working in sort of heavily regulated industries. We do need to take a deep breath sometimes and actually make sure we're doing things properly and not going to overstep kind of any lines and so on. And that can sometimes require the input of people that just know things that other people in the organization don't, or have responsibilities that other people don't. One of the things for me that's jumping out as well is that as a manager, you do spend quite a lot of time on things that I can understand do seem a bit bureaucratic, but giving people their objectives for the year, or doing their appraisals, or just generally coaching them, or even doing the admin stuff, or dare I say, some occasionally the HR things, which can have a range of nice to not so nice about them. Where do those go? Who would be doing that?
The idea is that those responsibilities still exist because obviously that work has to be done.
Mm,
But it doesn't necessarily have to sit with your line manager anymore. But also, because your line manager isn't doing so much passing things up and down the chain, maybe they would have time to do it.
yeah.
And I think and it could be really beneficial, particularly for insurance pricing, where you have technical individuals. We talked about this last week. We've got technical individuals who haven't really had very much management training.
Yep.
And is it therefore more efficient, effective, I don't know, to say, well, focus more on the technical stuff because that's your thing?
Mm,
And, the goal setting, for example, we can move that responsibility. They talk a lot about that. He does mention later in the book that you'd need to totally restructure how your HR team
mm,
looks.
yeah, yeah.
Because if you perceive that someone is in charge of your progression, you're always going to want to do things their way and defer to them.
Okay. Yeah,
And so he
that
does
is
mention it.
true.
Yeah, I mean, he does mention it, an example where there's a committee and the secretary of the committee say, officially, she has the authority to schedule the meetings and cancel the meetings. But the CEO sends around an email saying, I'm away next week, let's cancel the meeting. Actually, it's not the CEO's authority to do that, according
Yeah.
to these rules, the secretaries. Now,
Okay.
if the secretary wants to consider that request, she can, but also she's well within her right to just say, no, we're going to do it anyway, like
Yeah.
decide.
Hmm.
And he says that he saw this situation, and what ended up happening was the secretary said in the next meeting, I would like to propose that it happens anyway, that we never reschedule it, that it just happens with whoever's here. And he said what that actually showed was that even though they're playing within the rules of this game where there is technically no vertical structure, clearly that secretary felt that there was a vertical structure between her and the CEO, because otherwise she wouldn't have felt the need to put that in writing. If she felt confident in her own authority and that there wasn't going to be some kind of negative repercussion for her progression or performance or whatever
Yeah.
from the CEO, then she wouldn't have had to say that. So he does kind of flag that.
It does feel to me like even though you say things are flat, naturally you will evolve structures of hierarchy around things. I'm feeling a bit Lord of the Flies about it, if I'm honest. I'm sure, yeah, most people will get the reference to the book where the boys are left alone on an island and end up building their own structures of leadership. If that's the best way I can put it. My view is I'm struggling to see how this would work in a regulated industry or in a particularly large organization where there's sort of thousands of staff. I think it could be very chaotic. So what would you say? Is this something you would recommend?
Yeah. I would not recommend this book for insurance companies. He gives some really good manufacturing examples. And I think that for manufacturing physical products, he's got some really good use cases. But I don't think this works in insurance companies. So save yourself the time for reading it. However, I do want to say, though, there are some things that I think you can implement from it, even if you're not going to, go full, like,
No
abolish
hierarchy.
hierarchy.
Okay.
So there are some things. I'll run these down in a bit of detail so you don't feel you have to read the rest of the book. All right. So the first thing is defining roles and responsibilities in a really detailed way. And obviously, this is the foundation of this. If there's an issue, it's usually down to unclear responsibilities. And I think lots of pricing teams have this. A team of maybe 7 to 10 people might have one mission statement.
Mm.
And, that's fine, but they probably do a whole lot of other stuff. And I do think that if there's an issue, whether that's an error in deployment or even just a relationship issue, it's usually down to unclear responsibilities. So I would say really try and firstly define a clear mission statement for even the smallest team, even if you've got just 3 people, give them a clear, this is what you do. Julia Lessing's podcast, when I went on her podcast, we did a really good session on that. I felt like she had really good questions for how to elicit a good mission statement.
We'll put a link in the comments.
Thank you. So yeah, keeping those up to date and referring to them as well, and just get really detailed, even to the extent of who tells governance that we're about to start doing this kind of project.
Mm.
Someone needs to tell them. And that is probably not something that you have currently, I would say, in a mission statement in your job description. But if you don't tell them, that's going to cause an issue. So get detailed, get your Post-it notes out and really drill into it. Similarly, the book is very clear that you assign actions and responsibilities to roles, not people. So if you want,
yeah, I can get with that. I understand.
if you want something doing, ask a busy person. That's great, isn't it? But the problem is that busy person can end up with a whole load of stuff that doesn't really make sense for their role. Maybe it made sense for their role 2 years ago, or maybe it didn't even make sense then. But it can distract from their main objectives and can cause some of these issues later on, maybe if they leave, or even if someone new comes in and say, why is that person doing it? Why aren't I doing it? So, for example, if we're talking about a pricing deployment and we say, who should be responsible for scheduling and running the post-deployment retro? Maybe the answer in your organization currently is Sarah is really good at running retros. We'll ask her to do them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe she is. But actually, if Sarah is technical pricing manager, is it really her remit? Is that really a job that you would assign to a technical pricing manager? Mm-hmm. So if you use the role name, so if you say, who should run the post-deployment retro? The technical pricing manager. Does it fit? No, maybe not. So using the roles, not the names, can highlight those discrepancies, which I thought that was a really good tip, actually, but trying to work out who should do this task.
Yeah, I do quite like that, actually. There is a habit to give things to people that they want or they're good at, definitely. I think a good way to set up a pricing team is to have the chain where you've got risk pricing and market pricing and deployment. But that can become tricky with some of the actual jobs and responsibilities. If you do have an error in the risk layer, then was it a deployment problem or was it actually because of the risk pricing and so on? So I can understand how it is better to talk about kind of roles and responsibilities for the actual work and tasks rather than just dividing things up to who fits doing the work, which I think is probably what people do more and more.
I think it works as well because insurance pricing, there's so much churn.
Yeah, true.
Some companies cycle through analysts every 2 years.
That's one of the things that was coming up to me as a difficulty with this Holacracy method, though, is that people come and go. And I can imagine it's quite a nightmare to keep a record of who's responsible for what in that situation where it's not hierarchical. I mean, the thing about hierarchy is that you've ultimately got a single person responsible for pricing. And below them, you've got people responsible for parts of pricing. So it makes it easier to know who to go to, at least just to start the ball rolling on where a task fits in that kind of cascade downwards.
Yeah, so you'd still have that. So the idea is that you can have circles, right? So it's some
Okay.
to some extent, you still have that. You might have a technical pricing circle, for example, and that has 7 dots in it. Each one is a person. And that might sit in a wider circle of the overall pricing team. But there are places where that circle needs to interface, which is a very weird term. But, sometimes that circle will need to talk to another circle. And the idea is that it's one person's responsibility to be the barrier of the circle, almost the gatekeeper of what comes in, what goes out. And so it protects the people inside the circle. They can still focus on it. But I mean, that's kind of what I think good managers do, right? Good managers act as an umbrella for their team and an amplifier for their team. If you do good things, you want your manager to shout about it. If there's stuff coming in, you're under heavy flack for whatever reason, you want your manager to act like an umbrella. And so this barrier kind of does a similar thing to that. So it's not abolishing, who should I go to? Anything is up for grabs. It's really about what are the specific authorities that individuals have. I still don't think it works for insurance pricing. Great.
No, I see those kind of barrier or connection points as probably being where a lot of the power is going to end up residing, although it isn't necessarily said to be in that position. And that, for me, that's kind of a negative of the whole system, because I can see starting off and saying, yeah, this is great because we're getting rid of all of these layers and that's going to make things much more efficient, because, sometimes senior management, getting time with them can be a blocker to getting things done. But it feels to me like the blocker is going to become passing messages to someone so that they can talk to another team. I have worked in multiple other countries, and there's a particular one which is very hierarchical, but in a very particular way. So if you want to talk to someone who works in a different department, you aren't really meant to go and talk to them. What you're meant to do is tell your manager up the line, and then they will tell somebody who's in the same hierarchy as that person at roughly the same level, and then they will take the message downwards. And the funny thing is that this feels similar to that to me, except we're doing lines instead of pyramids.
Yeah.
Or circles. It's kind of circles rather than triangles to me. It's like I'm still going to be passing messages to somebody to interface to someone else to have it come back round. And it feels like that's going to be a blocker to progress.
Yeah, on the one hand, yes. On the other hand, I think the idea is that you're going to be passing messages a lot less, because if you imagine a normal pyramid type structure, and maybe the head of pricing has a team of 50 people, any of those 25 analysts could make a proposal and that need to go to the head of pricing for their review. So the head of pricing could be inundated with these proposals all the time.
That's true.
So the managers then are passing things up and down, and and the idea with this is that you're passing less around because you work within your own authority. I don't think it does work for insurance, I'm going to be honest. But I think that assigning responsibilities to roles in particular, I do think there's a really good point about roles and responsibilities that I don't think insurers do that well, partly because the pricing system is so complicated and interconnected. Roles and responsibilities, big theme in this book. I think the other thing that people could learn from this book is how to define their strategy better. So one thing that really comes out of this is that if you want people to have authority to make good decisions, they need to know where they're trying to get to. They need some kind of metric of what is a good decision. And so one thing they say is define your strategy and define it really clearly. And I think most companies will say, yeah, I've got a really good strategy. I defined it really clearly. The strategy is simplification.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So if it's simplification, then it would be good if we start removing products, if we consolidate products. Oh no, I don't want you to do that. Are you? And so it becomes kind of a difficult thing. And I've been in teams before where they've said, it's going to be one of our values this year to focus on documentation. We want really good documentation. And so you get to a point and you think, oh, I need to do 2 weeks worth of really good documentation on this handover. Oh, you don't have time for that. We've got to move you on to the next thing. And then you think, well, hang on, that's the stress. Is that? No, it's not. It gets really confusing, right? In the book, they say, define your strategy in terms of X ahead of Y, where Y is a good thing. Okay. So they've both got to be good things in themselves. So, for example, you could say documentation ahead of getting new analysis out. If ever an analyst is thinking, I'm at the end of my project, should I spend the 2 weeks properly documenting or should I move on to the next quick win? They're going to already have a way to orientate themselves.
Yeah.
In the book, he uses the example of creating scalable processes ahead of launching new products. So this is like a manufacturing example, obviously. I think that works really well because then instead of someone they get a customer query and they just whip off a quick response and it's done, but then 2 days later they get another similar question. In the book, he was saying it's better to spend the time to create a template for that response.
Yeah.
I think the reason this works is because you can't possibly foresee all of the possible decisions and scenarios you'll face. But if you know that your general principle is X ahead of Y, and you could have multiple of these statements, that people are much better placed to make their own decisions instead of passing these decisions up the chain and back.
Yeah. I think, and now you've explained more, I think I do understand it better.
So there are some valuable points in this book for insurers, but honestly, I wouldn't recommend people in insurance pricing read it. Save yourself the time. Maybe have a think about roles and responsibilities and strategy in your team.
Right. Next time we have a book that I know you'll recommend, Catherine, because you'd already recommended it to me. So it's Pathfinders by Will Iredale.
I am so excited about the next one.
It's not directly insurance related, but I think there are some absolutely amazing lessons in it. And I think it's a great book as well.
It is a really fantastic book.
Yeah, it really is. I'm really looking forward to next time. So thank you ever so much for joining us, and we will see you then. PriceWriters transforms pricing professionals into the most respected leaders in insurance. Find out more about our engaging training, graduate schemes, and workshops by visiting PriceWriters.com.